Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Hirobe Talks. I'm sat here with Leo Griffin and I'm very, very excited for this one. Leo, for those of you who don't know you already, could you please just introduce yourself, who you are, where you come from, etc.?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I'm excited to be here as well. Yes, my name's Leo Griffin. I am a technology, a digital executive, worked closely with Adobe on a number of their solutions. I've had a really rich and interesting career so far. Happy to tell you a little bit about it if it's useful. But looking forward to our conversation.
Awesome. Likewise, Leo. I think anyone that knows me will know how long I've been wanting to speak with yourself, just because of the work that you've done and delivered, and sort of just your, I suppose, prestige in the Adobe space as well, which is awesome. So, I think, do you mind giving us a rundown of, I suppose, sort of your history, what's brought you to this point as well?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So I've had, I would say, a pretty broad-based career focused around consumer and technology sectors. I started my career, so I'm a Brit. I grew up in the UK and was lucky enough to go to the London School of Economics, which is an amazing school. And then I started out my career as a management consultant, and so I did that for a decade, working with companies on business strategy. And then from then, I went into private equity, where I was investing in media and technology companies, basically vetting and executing investments and hiring teams and sitting on boards and advising companies. And then I decided to have a crack at entrepreneurship, and I was CEO of a couple of different consumer-focused companies, including a technology startup. Had a lot of fun and learned a lot. Sadly, I did not become a billionaire, but it's all good. And so then I became a technology executive at big enterprises. I worked for a company called VF Corp, which owns brands like the North Face and Vans. And then most recently, I was at Hanes Brands, which owns Hanes, which is an iconic 120-year-old innerwear brand, and Champion, which is America's kind of original athletic wear company, which Hanes Brands just sold. And at both of those companies, I worked on digital transformation, upgrading the digital capabilities in areas like e-commerce and marketing technology, and enabling them to serve consumers' very rapidly evolving needs better.
Awesome. No, thank you for that. And I think, a great sort of introduction to sort of what's brought you to this point as well. Now, quite selfishly from our side, before I go into sort of the Adobe experience and what you've done, I think I would love to learn what's the transition been like from going from the UK to the US, because I work with a lot of people at the moment who are in the process of that switch or looking into it. I know one thing we've just discussed prior to the call is that you still drink Yorkshire Gold tea, which is awesome.
Yes, and you're right about that. I have a cup right here, and I do love a fine cuppa. I mean, I love both the UK and the US. Two nations that are divided by a common language, right? I love moving back and forth between the two of them. I think the US is an exciting place to be, simply put, because everything is bigger, right? And it is, from a technology point of view, the place to be. It's where many of the world's leading technology companies are, and it's the crucible of technology innovation. So I've loved it from that point of view. But I also love spending time in the UK. I've got so many friends and family there, and just the culture, the people, and the tea, all fabulous.
Awesome. No, thank you for that. I think a lot of our viewers will really find that valuable as well. And I think, one thing you mentioned there is, I suppose, the vastness as well. So when I'm talking to my US candidates, and if it's, say, an office-based role, Like, I'm very surprised that people will travel like 2 hours a day either way to get into the office. Like, travel doesn't seem as much of a deal because I think the country is just so big. I know that sounds bizarre, but for us, like, I'd never travel 2 hours for a job. Whereas in the US, it's, yeah, I've got guys that travel all over. It's very different culture in a very nice way as well.
Yeah, I mean, I live in Denver, and you know, my most recent role at Hanes Brands is in North Carolina, and so that's, you know, 100 miles away. Obviously, I was not commuting 1,500 miles a day. That would be quite the round trip. But yes, it's certainly a different perspective about distances. And of course, we also have multiple time zones in the US, and so working across time zones is something you have to get pretty used to as well.
Awesome. No, I appreciate that. I suppose we best talk all things tech and Adobe as well, because I suppose that is the point of my podcast. I think one thing that we can't avoid that I've seen from a lot of my clients at the moment is sort of the rise of Edge Delivery Service. Could you tell me a little bit more about, you know, what is Edge Delivery Services and you know, why this sort of uptake, I suppose?
Yeah, so Edge Delivery Services is Adobe's new approach to delivering websites that are lightning fast. And by lightning, you know, Adobe say that, so Lighthouse score is a broad measure of the responsiveness of websites. It covers, you know, multiple different aspects of speed. And, you know, Adobe Edge Delivery Services can deliver sites that are in the high 90s, in some cases 100. And, you know, Lighthouse goes from 0 to 100, right? So it is, so when I say lightning fast, they are really incredibly fast. And I think one of the things that is remarkable about it is that, you know, they've gone from delivering content sites to e-commerce sites using Edge Delivery Services, and there really is nothing that comes close to this. If you look at, you know, Amazon, which obviously has just the most amazing infrastructure, it has a Lighthouse score in the 60s typically. You know, other really major leading sites might be in the 40s or 50s. And it's very common for most e-commerce sites to be, I would say, in the 30s. And so to be able to deliver an e-commerce site with a Lighthouse score in the high 90s is truly remarkable. The other thing I'd say about Edge Delivery Services is that it dramatically simplifies the workflows that happen behind the scenes to create and update websites. And that actually can have a very significant impact on the cost of running a site and the agility of it. So, you know, I started talking with Adobe about Edge Delivery Services for e-commerce in late 2022. At that time, Edge Delivery was being used on a small number of content sites, some large content sites, but they only had a relatively small number of deployments. And it hadn't been deployed at all on e-commerce. And e-commerce sites are much more complicated because you're bringing together so many things. Obviously, you've got to manage personalization, but and transactions, and you're bringing content in from usually, you know, many different sources and so on. So there's a lot going on that tends to slow these sites down and make it complicated. So, you know, my partners in the business were really frustrated that the speed of our websites was not as fast as they wanted, and they, I think, correctly believed that speed was stifling the growth of the sites. So, you know, we have been working at this point for about 18 months on trying to increase the speed of the sites using full stack Adobe Commerce. And honestly, we didn't have a lot to show for it. We were making incremental gains, but you know, everybody's focusing on this to some extent, and you know, they may be making incremental gains as well. So really, from a relative point of view, we weren't making a lot of progress. So I began talking with Adobe about, you know, what ideas they had, and you know, ideas that we had as well of things that we might be able to do, that led to you know, my being introduced to what really was a kind of skunk works, I would say, at Adobe, a team based in Switzerland and we ultimately agreed to work together on evolving Edge Delivery to work for consumer e-commerce sites. And so that was really exciting. Took us about 9 months of working very closely with Adobe. And then in late 2023, we launched maidenform.com as what Adobe and I believed was the fastest consumer e-commerce site in the world. We had depending on when you checked, we'd had a lighthouse score typically of 99 or 100, which is just incredible. So that was an enormous privilege to be part of that. And subsequently we continued to work very closely with Adobe to launch several other e-commerce sites on Edge Delivery.
Awesome. And I think that's testament to the work that you and Adobe have done together. I suppose a question I'd have off the back of that is, why is speed so important to, I suppose, both the consumer and the seller, really?
Yeah. So I think there are 3 significant impacts that site speed has. The first one is that it drives traffic. And the reason that it drives traffic is that Google and other search engines are using speed as a factor in their search algorithms, as well as in their search engine marketing algorithms. Google obviously has the Chrome browser, and they are essentially crowdsourcing speed measurements, right? So they're using your Chrome browser to measure speed in the field of every website out there, right? And so they've got an incredible database of exactly how responsive sites are on mobile and on desktop, and they're using that information and feeding it into those algorithms. And so if you are, and the rationale for that is that they obviously want to send the search user to sites that are going to give that user a really good experience. And part of good experience for consumers is speed. And so, this doesn't happen overnight, but if you launch a much faster site, you will see your position in search improve dramatically. And for companies like Hanes Brands, that is competing in areas where kind of the search terms are very popular, right? So whether that be hoodie or sports bra or t-shirt bra or something like that, right? They're highly competitive categories, they're highly competitive search terms. And so if you're delivering a really fast experience, then that, Google says, oh, this is great, I'm going to send more people there. So, we saw, I would say, it's reasonable to expect a more than 100%, perhaps a 200% growth in organic, in search traffic rather, as a result of that. So the second area is bounce, right? We've all had that experience of going to a site, it's really slow, you're seeing the spinning wheels, as it were, and you're like, oh, I'm done, and you bounce away, right? And bounce is a huge proportion of traffic that you have coming to your sites is bouncing. And so anything you can do to reduce that bounce, and speed obviously isn't the only factor in bounce, but it's a major one, is huge, because those are people who are staying on your site and looking at what you've got to offer, and potentially they're buyers, right? And then the third factor is conversion. So fast sites tend to convert better, and I think that's because, in part, consumers, we're all a bit impatient. And so, you don't just choose to bounce at the first page. You might be choosing to bounce, as you're going further into the site, right? If it's not responsive, so you're eliminating that. You're getting people further down the funnel. The other thing that I've seen is just that consumers are looking at more stuff. Even if they're spending the same amount of time on site, they're able to look at more PDPs and so on. And so just the likelihood that they'll see something that they'll put it in their basket and they'll choose to buy it is higher. So those 3 things add up to a pretty significant shift in e-commerce performance and site performance. So yeah, that is why speed matters.
No, I really appreciate that because, yeah, obviously, I think from my side, as a consumer, as a buyer, I know that using sites, I will typically, if a site's, again, a spinning wheel that you mentioned, I'll leave and I'll just go on something else. But I didn't know that it actually affected sort of the SEO sort of traffic and, the Google search results. I think that's really interesting as well, which is, yeah, something I didn't know. So thank you for that one, Leo. In terms of yourself, then, obviously, I know that you've had a really rich career leading, some excellent teams across your time, and I'd love to learn a little bit more about sort of your leadership experience. How do you, Leo, sort of drive innovation in a team, and how do you create a work environment that people want to be a part of?
Yeah, and so I should say I'm not as probably should be clear from my background. I'm not a developer, right? I mean, I've toyed around with computers, since I was a teenager. So I have some technical understanding, but I don't write code. So driving these kind of changes and experiences really requires a great team, and it's a competitive world out there, right? So competing for the best talent. I mean, this extremely well, right? It's like getting really high quality talent and then retaining that talent is a challenge. So in one of my recent roles, I arrived to find a small talented team, operating some technology stacks that were relatively basic, I would say, and were underperforming in a number of areas. And it's pretty clear that getting to where we needed to be was going to take a significant amount of innovation. And I think innovation requires several things. Great people and great partnerships, I would say. And so focusing on the people side, there are a few things I would say that one needs to do to build an innovative team and to keep an innovative team. So I think it's a lot of it is about culture, right? And so talking about innovation and the importance of innovation, and innovation not just as a goal in of itself, but innovation that drives better consumer experiences, right? I think just talking about that and repeating that is really important. Celebrating ideas. I would say, working to a place where the ideas are coming from, the ideas are bubbling up to you, right? It's not just that you're telling people what to do, right? But you're giving people the opportunity to come up with ideas. You're celebrating those, and you're celebrating the achievements in that area. Innovation, it doesn't always succeed. And so I think the second thing to focus on is giving people permission to fail, and therefore, kind of fostering that culture of experimentation. And it's easy to kind of get the first part right and talk about innovation and celebrate when things go right. But people notice when things go wrong, and fingers get pointed, or people get somehow punished, or there's kind of talk about, oh, this was all someone's fault, and so on. So I mean, I guess one of the leadership lessons is that when things go wrong, first of all, that's my fault, right? Not the team's fault, right? I think you have to own the failures, and you've got to be, you've got to be kind of willing to stand up for the team and say, this went wrong, it's my fault, we'll fix it, right? I think it's important to understand why failures happened, but again, not to point fingers, right? So you can learn from your failures, but you need to do that in a way that doesn't make individuals feel like they failed. So that's the second thing. The third thing I would say is I'm a big fan of the agile methodology. I think working in agile helps to foster a number of these things. The short cycle of working in typically in a 2-week sprint, right, enables you to make relatively short, cheap experiments, right? Because you're looking for incremental progress over those sprints, and finding the time to do innovation sprints as well, I think is a great thing. In a business where you're pushing to achieve results and to make changes, it can be difficult to carve out the time to run innovation sprints. And I would say, in my own experience, I've not always succeeded at that, but I think it does really help. So those are some of the people things. And I think if you do all of those things, my goal was to create a team where if you were in the Adobe commerce world, then working at Hanes Brands was a great thing to have on your resume, right? And that people would want to come and join our team because we were known as a place that was really innovating in the Adobe ecosystem, and that when they got there, people would feel like they were learning from others, they were doing things that were really innovative, and therefore that they had a supportive team and boss and so on, and that they were making a real difference for consumers, and that all of those things would lead them to want to stay. And I think by and large we made some great progress in that, which I was really proud of, and built a team that I just loved working with.
Definitely. I think your views on leadership are incredibly wholesome and lovely. I think that I think key takeaways there are how you've highlighted. I think that failure is something that you embrace for yourself. It isn't pointing fingers, and I think that's a really good mentality that helps to build these teams that you've done. Obviously, I won't mention any names, but I know people, Leo, that have worked for yourself, and they've always said, what a great leader you were as well. There's a lot of love for you and sort of what you did for your teams as well. So, yeah, really incredible points there that I think are, in this market, more important than ever, I think, when times are a little bit tough. And thank you for that insight as well. I suppose on that topic then, in terms of, I know you mentioned Adobe and the work that you did alongside them. Obviously, especially with the work with Hanes. I think, how do businesses identify the right technology partners for their needs, and how important is that working relationship between the client and the tech partners?
Yeah, so I think that finding those partnerships is a critical part of innovation, right? So consumer brand companies, which is where I've focused my work, are they have sizable technology budgets, but they're often grappling with many challenges, tech debt, disparate systems, pulling all of your data together. There's many different things that they're working with, and so the amount of money that you can really devote to innovation can be quite limited. And so you've got to find partners who have significant innovation budgets that you can work with and benefit from. And it can truly be a partnership because these companies need consumer, they need input from their customers, right, to shape their roadmaps and help develop their products. So from my perspective, it really can be really valuable to find and build those partnerships. And as you're out there looking for companies to partner with, I think there's 3 things to think about. So the first one is the mission and strategy of the technology company aligned with your own goals and mission and strategy. So Adobe's is changing the world through personalized digital experiences. Adobe empowers everyone everywhere to imagine, create, and bring any digital experience to life. I love that. It's a great mission statement. And I chose Adobe as to be a significant partner. And to be clear, I came into a situation where Adobe was an incumbent, but really built a much deeper relationship and partnership, and did that because of that alignment, right? Creating those really powerful digital experiences that are personalized. To have a company that is investing huge amounts of money in driving the technology to enable that. Clearly, my view was that was going to enable us to go much faster, and I think that paid off. The second thing I think is a willingness to co-invest, and I think most successful technology companies are. I mean, they are investing and they are investing alongside their clients, but they can't necessarily do that with every client, right? So you've got to be in a situation where you've got an account team that is willing to go to bat with you and find opportunities where you can co-invest, and that you've got the ears of leadership at those companies in order to be able to get them to co-invest with you, right? And I think particularly I've had experiences working with companies that have been through some relatively challenging economic times, and there've been times when I haven't had a lot of money in my pocket, and so part of the currency that I've been able to bring to drive these kind of changes is a partnership where we are contributing knowledge to our technology partner, and also that we're kind of willing to go out there and talk about the successes. And so there's multiple elements of a partnership. It isn't just about we're going to pay you a bunch of money and you're going to give us technology products.
Awesome.
So, and then thirdly, I would say you really want to work with companies that are open to feedback. I think where there are customer advisory boards and you can be part of that, I think that's a critical element of it. I would say generally about Adobe, I think they have a cultural value of being open to feedback, and I love that. I've worked for companies in the past where that was a cultural value, and we specifically hired the people who were open to feedback. And it's something that I've noticed about all of the wonderful people that I've worked with at Adobe. You can tell them, man, you're messing up. This is not working, and they do not get defensive. They'll jump on it. They'll listen. They'll understand what's going wrong, and they'll jump on it. And that makes a huge difference, I think, and it's really an important part of partnership. So those are the criteria that I look for.
Awesome. No, again, really good points. And I think that final one is really sort of in line from someone who's been that side of the fence like yourself. And yeah, I think being open to feedback and I think says a lot about the values of the company as well, which then aligns with yourself and I suppose why you picked them. And I think coming on to personalization, a lot of my clients have seen, I suppose AEP is something that has really increased our hiring needs. We're staffing. I obviously do a lot with commerce still, and obviously Magento open source as well, but coupled with sort of AEP and AJO and sort of customer data as well. A lot of clients now seem to be sort of offering multiple Adobe products and sort of licenses. Now, I know there's an additional cost factor to consider here, for the retailers. So how can clients benefit from this spend, and what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, so I mean, I think Adobe positions itself as I would say kind of a premier supplier, a premium supplier, maybe. They are not typically the cheapest in most situations. Obviously they offer generally, I think, excellent products, but they're not always cheap. I would say it's incumbent on all software companies, not just Adobe, to develop products that are differentiated and that create real value for their clients. And obviously, they can capture, software companies can capture a portion of that value. When I think about Adobe Commerce, I think there are some factors that differentiate it from some of the from the other providers out there. In my view, it's a highly composable and highly customizable platform that, with the addition of Edge Delivery, can create literally the world's fastest e-commerce sites. And we've talked about why that matters, why that creates value. I think Adobe's put a lot of investment into commerce. I saw huge changes in commerce in the period that that I've been working with it, and so I think it's become much more scalable. It obviously integrates better with Adobe's the other elements of the Adobe Experience Platform. Another area that we were kind of client zero with Adobe was in developing the data layer and the integration between commerce and the Adobe CDP, and so that has become, I think, that's really now an off-the-shelf product, and it, also integrates well with some of the content supply chain products that Adobe has, and I think that's an area of real growth, and really an interesting area. So, those are all things I think that differentiate commerce. I think that the experience platform and CDP in particular it's an extremely powerful, very flexible product, and I think there's pros and cons to that, right? It is where I think that there's opportunity for Adobe, and I know Adobe's working on a lot of this, but is to improve kind of some of the out-of-the-box functionality and to by I would say industry segment, to think about what are the primary use cases and to make those more immediately accessible. So I think, but the data architecture, the consumer data architecture, I think is incredibly powerful in Adobe's products. It's obviously highly scalable, and the flexibility on it, the fact that it is used by really big airlines, by really huge retailers, right, by very big telecom companies and so on. I mean, they're very different businesses, and the fact that they're able to take this tool and use it very powerfully, speaks, I think, to the capabilities of that product. But it's not, if you're whatever industry you're in, you also want to go and look at, what are there kind of CDP products that are built specifically for my industry, and what are the trade-offs of going with narrower, probably less powerful, less flexible product, versus what I would describe as kind of the most powerful set of Lego bricks in the industry for Adobe's system. So I think for every e-commerce company or consumer company out there, you need to look at all of the options out there. Adobe has got a powerful set of solutions, but it's not going to be the right solution for every customer. And that, by the way, is what differentiation is about, right? I mean, you want to create unique products in the marketplace that serve some clients really well, but that generally means that you're not going to serve every client really well. And so, figuring out for you what's the best solution. There are a lot of very capable and competitive systems out there. Adobe is fabulous, but there are other competitors out there too.
Awesome. And I think does it come down then to, I suppose, the real cost of ROI? I think when you look at something in that initial bid meeting, so if I was a retailer looking at choosing between two different things, is it about getting out of the initial thought of that one's more expensive initially, so I'm not going to go with them? Is it more what they can offer you over the long term in terms of that not necessarily a cost saving, but the experience that they would offer your website or your company, and how that would drive sales in the long term?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think that Shopify, BigCommerce, and so on are highly capable e-commerce systems. If you've got a pretty, they're going to be a little less configurable, right? But if you've got a relatively standard requirement, then those are great platforms that are likely going to cost you less money. And they're going to deliver you, great websites, but they're not going to be as fast as an edge delivery site, right? And so, is the ROI on paying a bit more for that? Is the extra traffic and so on going to deliver for you? So those are some of the things that you need to think about. And I think that Adobe is, they've been doing a great job of investing in developing their products and sharpening some of the use cases around them and the ROI. Depending on the focus of your business, it may or may not be the right solution for you. But looking at those factors can help you make your decision.
Awesome. Oh, thank you, Leo. And I think, for me, I think this episode has been particularly enlightening. I almost forgot for a second that we're on a podcast. I've just been listening to you talk and gaining your insights, because it's so relatable for the clients I'm working with at the minute. And for me, it's been a real privilege getting to know you, the past couple of months, because you are just a stellar guy. What's next for you at the minute? What's happening, and what are your next plans?
Yeah, I've been enjoying a beautiful fall in Colorado and getting out on my bike, and hoping I'm going to get out to do a little bit of skiing. But I'm also, looking at doing some consulting work with some, really well-known consumer brands, while looking for my next full-time leadership role. And I'm really looking for something, where I can bring my experience and skill set in digital strategy, in driving innovation, and in overall execution and building teams. Bring all of those together and really hopefully help a company get to the next level. And obviously, if anyone's listening and they want to connect with me on LinkedIn, please just reach out and mention that you listen to the podcast, and I'd be delighted to connect and continue the conversation.
Awesome, man. I'm sure any company will be lucky to have you, especially from what I know of the work that you've delivered in your time. Thank you again. I know you're a very busy guy, Leo, so thank you for spending the time on the podcast today. It has been an absolute pleasure. And I wish you well in your time in the States at the minute as well.
Tom, thank you so much. It has been a real privilege talking to you today.
You're a star. Thank you very much, man. I'll speak to you soon, and best of luck.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care.